Yeah, welcome everyone, and thank you for having this opportunity to present the Bedretto Underground Lab to this community. The Bedretto Underground, the Bedretto Lab in short, is a relatively large research facility, and it was initiated at some point to bridge the gap between small-scale laboratory experiments and real in situ experiments, because that's a scale where we lack appropriate data. And to overcome this, we have built a Bedretto Lab. We have a lot of experiments at laboratory scale. We did a first set of experiments some years ago in the Grimsel Underground Laboratory at 10-meter scale and learned a lot there. And then we found the opportunity in an abandoned tunnel in Switzerland where we could build a new lab, which is now at the several 100-meter scale. And in the middle of it, we built a new lab, which is some underground space, relatively small still. But we then use a couple of boreholes, relatively long boreholes, a few 100-meter scale, to investigate the rock volume for different purposes. Part of the Bedretto Lab is part of the integrated and multi-scale approach from laboratory measurements to representative hectometer scale, the mesoscale, and then towards large scale or even structural or tectonic scales. And this is integrated there with experiments, but also together with computational modeling to verify and confirm all our experiments. So these are the two approaches that we follow. The Bedretto Lab is located in Ticino in Switzerland. It is in an abandoned railway tunnel or in a side tunnel from a railway. We have an overburden of about 1,000 to 1,500 meters. That gives us very representative conditions in terms of stress and hydraulic pressure, pore pressure. And in that, we have started with the first cavern, and that there were already existing 6 meters wide, 50 to 100 meters long. And we used this space in the underground to build this lab space. It's pretty remote, so we are here in the last part of the Bedretto Valley with limited access, which is an advantage. But we are still, it's easy to access the lab. We have even public transport up here, and we can easily work here most of the week. We have 2 exits, so we enter from the portal on the left on the lower picture here. We have also a safety exit, an emergency exit to the Furka base tunnel, so that in case of any emergencies, we can escape to both sides. It is the longest tunnel in the Alps that is not supported, no shotcrete, no liners, nothing. That's bare rock over 5 kilometers, and it's a fantastic opportunity to study geosciences on all scales. This view into the lab, that is a slightly extended lab space, so 3 meters high, 6 meters wide, and about 100 meters long. And you see already that's jam-packed with infrastructure. We have ventilation, we have high power voltage there, and lots of instruments and sensors embedded in the boreholes and acquisition centers, large acquisition units. We produce about a terabyte of data per day when we are running experiments. To start with, we have produced a very detailed structural geological model, because the geological structures are the basis for most of our experiments. And our geological team from Alberto Ceccato and group, they have spent a lot of time in the tunnel and on the surface to build a very comprehensive geological model. Since most of our experiments include some induced seismicity, we have also a very dense seismic network. On top of the existing high-resolution Swiss seismic network, we have installed sensors along the tunnel at various places, but also additional stations on the surface, so that we have a very high magnitude of completeness, or very low magnitude of completeness, up to -2, that we can then use on top of our experiment monitoring to detect all induced seismicity. When we're doing experiments, and that's the figure, the table below, we have some thresholds and some traffic light systems from which we then have yellow, orange, or even red alerts. We never had a red alert, so But depending on the ground motion that we observe and the observed magnitudes, we then have safety measures to stop the experiments and to leave the tunnel in a worst case. So the safety aspect, it's about safe and controlled application of geothermal energy. Safety aspect is playing a very important role. So in the Bedretto Lab, we have a couple of test beds that we call, you see, we have the geothermal test bed that was the first initiative to build this lab, but then having the opportunity of the lab, we also have extended it to the earthquake physics test bed with a FEAR project. And all along the tunnel, we also have we sample, or a group samples all across the lab, water and other samples for a deep life observatory. They detect any type of microbes and viruses from ancient times that are still living in the tunnel. So you see from the sketch that the geothermal testbed is a sequence of long boreholes. They are up to 400 meters long for injection and 7 more than 300 meter long observation and monitoring boreholes. We had to, for the small scale, we had to the company had to build special drill rigs to drill these size of boreholes in the deep underground. On the lower picture, you see the instrumentation where we have instrumented the boreholes with all types of sensors, mostly acoustic emission and seismic sensors, but also distributed strain, distributed temperature, distributed acoustic sensing, pore pressure, everything that is needed to understand the rock mechanics processes in the underground were installed in these boreholes. And then the large picture at the bottom shows when we cemented the boreholes to bring the rock back to the original state. So we have no hydraulic shortcuts. We have them back into a mechanical original conditions. And this was done within a combined project from Zodrax, D-Stress, and Walter, European and Swiss projects, hand in hand, drilled these boreholes, completed them, and used them for their experiments. Just a quick snapshot of the sensor network. We are now looking in map or in front view on the boreholes. The gray bar on the top is the tunnel. And you see from the scale that the longest boreholes, ST1, the stimulation borehole, is a industry standard multi-packer system where we can inject in separated intervals. This is 400 meters long. And then depending on the purpose, the monitoring boreholes with the small symbols here indicating the different sensors are then picking up all type of rock mechanic and seismic response of the rock. A typical experiment for this type of stimulations, most of you will know that, is that we inject water either at a constant pressure or at a constant flow rate, and then the rock responds. And at a certain point, when we have stimulated the rock to a critical state, then we induce seismicity. And this induced seismicity are the black dots. And you see whenever we increase the injection pressure, the red line, to a critical state, it stays for a while on a constant level, and then we observe major ruptures and larger seismicity. What is important to note is that when we shut in, so when we stop the injection and shut in the borehole, the seismicity stops almost immediately. It decays very rapidly back to normal stage, and we have shown that we can control with the multi-stage simulation the occurring induced seismicity. Here you see a map of the induced seismicity, and the different colors indicate the seismic events that occurred in different injection experiments, all in different intervals along the injection borehole. And it's pretty impressive that we can really, that the seismicity occurs along existing geological structures, and B, that it is also only happening close to the injection interval. So we can really isolate the rock volume into different compartments and stimulate the different compartments very isolated. That is valid for most of them, not for all. You see the lowest one here, the lowest interval, the red one, also has clusters which are a little bit remote. And the stars indicate always the largest seismic event for this simulation. So in most cases, the events occur close to the injection intervals, but there are a few that generate clusters where the fluid actually propagates further into the volume. And now that we have all the data on disk, we are about to study them further and closer to see if we understand these patterns even better. Besides that, induced seismicity was a major focus of it, but we have all the different types of data. We have different distributed temperature sensing, distributed strain sensing, and also discrete strain sensing with very high. Discrete strain sensing with FPG sensors, which give a higher resolution. Now that we have this this rock volume, this reservoir in place, we have stimulated it. We have observed increased transmissivity to a production borehole, and also increased hydraulic transmissivity before and after. Now we are prepared to, in the beach project, Bedretto heat storage and circulation project, to inject hot water into it. And you see here the different modeling of it. If you inject hot water, how the hot water plume will penetrate into the rock volume and heat it up over a certain period of time, and to be ready to be produced then in a second phase. That is simulated here in different phases of 3 months each, so that we inject hot water in summer, we have a rest phase in autumn, we produce in winter to give extra heat for district heating, for example. Then we give it a rest again in spring, and in summer we start again. And the reservoir will increase in base temperature over time, over a couple of cycles, but we will, that's what the models show, we will have a pretty efficient heat storage facility in crystalline rocks in this reservoir. And we have, the funding is now approved, and we will start injecting hot water, potentially even in summer or next summer with the first hot water phase. The second testbed that we are working at is the earthquake physics testbed. This is within the FEAR project, Fault Activation and Earthquake Rupture, multinational project and a large ERC grant. And for this purpose, we have selected a target fault that we want to make move. So we have a fault that is prone to slip when we stimulate it. And for this project, we aim at stimulating it in different patches and make it move with preconditioning and then stimulations. Extraordinary for this project is that we will drill into the fault or close and into the fault in several places and install sensors so that we look into the earthquake. We want to look in the fracture plane itself to observe the processes inside of the fracture. So the slip initiation, the rupture process, and the rest processes in terms of temperature, pressure, displacement, and of course, induced seismicity. We are prepared to induce an earthquake up to a magnitude 1 while not being in the tunnel, but controlling then the experiments from remote. But that is the first time that it is aimed to look into the earthquake plane, into the rupture plane during the experiment. And that's also multidisciplinary project. Of course, we start with a lot of modeling. We have active tomography. We have stress sensors at different places, tilt sensors. We have before and after some laboratory measurements, and we are planning an on-fault observatory with all types of sensors monitoring then the reaction of the rock, and in particular of the fault zone during the fault rupture process. What is also special is that for this experiment, we need to drill a side tunnel or blast a side tunnel. We have now excavated a start niche, do the first instrumentation at the moment. I just returned half an hour ago from borehole logging from the first instrumentation boreholes. And then we will drill a 100-meter long side tunnel, 3 meters in diameter. And from there, we will drill into the fault zone. The gray patch is the experiment tunnel, and all the different lines are the cross-fault observation boreholes. And of course, we have imaging boreholes on all sides to monitor with active tomography, also the processes before, during, and after the rupture process. A multitude of sensors, whatever we can place, acoustic emission and seismic sensors is, of course, the majority. but also pore pressure changes, temperature changes, and also SIMFIP displacement sensors in different various places will give us insight into the earthquake physics in situ. This is, or the SPINE project is a piggyback project associated to it, where we study the stress profiling, like the stress changes along borehole, and that is with these high resolution displacement sensors, the SIMFIP sensors that are manufactured at LNBL, the Berkeley lab, and they are project partners that provide these sensors at different places so that we can really look if and where the rupture will move. On top of it, we have at different places the Deep Life Observatory, where geobiologists, geochemists, and hydrologists are sampling the water in different places and studying then the sampled water under the microscope. And they have found an archaeobacteria type that was never found on the world before. So we have our own archaeobacteria specimen in Bedretto as well. We have a plenitude of projects running. Once such a laboratory is in place, there are a lot of interest from all over the place. Just to give you an overview, we started somewhere in 2018 building the tunnel, and now we have project for the next 3 to 4 years, and more projects, of course, as always, in the pipeline, and more partners interested to join our research community here. Our team in Switzerland, in Zurich, is about 30 people, from technicians, postdocs, senior researchers, professors. There are 5, 6 professorships involved in the different types of research. And maybe to be announced in this community, we are also in the first call of the transnational access of APOS, which was published just the other week. And so we are open. If you're interested to join with a project, we are happy to welcome you. Yeah, that was it from my side.